Call the council workshop to order. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Councilmember August, Councilmember Leesmeyer.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Denver. Here. And Mayor Mann.
Here.
Thank you. I will note that Mr. Edgerton is not able to be with us.
Very well. Councilmember Leesmeyer, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Sure. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. We have no presentations this evening other than the item at hand from staff. And before we take public comment, Mr. Johnson, could you set up the purpose of this meeting for us and the public?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This is has been a long, great journey, I think, is the real key for us. So last year, I think it was during January and February, there was some information from the public. We talked to council. We identified the home-based business ordinance was really not a one-size-fits-all. There were some concerns that the rural community, specifically the businesses in the rural community, were not able to fall under that category, and it was council's direction to me to come up with a solution that would not change the home-based business ordinance, but that may, in fact, assist the rural business community with businesses in that portion of the city, which is different than the home-based business occupation ordinance that we had before. So this really is an update to council of about the 12 meetings that we've had with representatives from the rural business community, most notably Mike Machado from Iron Tree and Roxanne Thompson, who is a representative of the rural community. And it's really a collaboration of our meetings. I don't know how much you want me to get into it, since I do know that we're going to have a staff report. But the basis of this is to give council an update on where we're at, and have folks from the rural business community here and to be able to talk and speak. And I believe Mr. Machado is prepared also as well to share some information from the rural business side of things. And really, just pretty excited to be able to sit here tonight and to provide this information for your information and feedback.
Thank you very much. With that in mind, then, this is a council workshop. It's designed for information flow, information gathering. There's only one of two decisions that can be made this evening. So, Madam Clerk, would you please call the first speaker? I'm assuming we have some. Do we want to move the public commenters to after the staff's presentation?
That's the question. That way, a lot of what they have to hear may answer their questions.
May I have a motion on that?
So moved.
Seconded by Mr. August. All in favor? Aye. Proceed with the staff report, and then we'll take public comment after.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Like I mentioned, we've had 12 meetings on this. Really, it was born out of the home-based business occupation not being a one-size-fits-all. That occupation and that ordinance really fits the residential community for tract homes. The rural business community, as you know, has been very active in the city of Menifee prior to incorporation, during incorporation, and now today. We have, like I mentioned earlier, met several times with a couple representatives for the group, one being Mike Machado, the other being Roxanne Thompson. Those meetings started in April of 2014 and continued up into this day. And really, I think that the big piece of the puzzle that we were missing is, if we're on such opposite sides of the spectrum, how do we get together to collaborate and cooperate and bring something forward that not only the city believes that it has the ability to regulate, and that the business community feels comfortable allowing us to regulate. I think that's where we kind of started from. And I think Mr. Machado will attest when he gets an opportunity to speak. We didn't come at this that we're all going to agree and this is exactly what we're going to present and this is how it's going to go. But the simple matter of it was, we learned a lot, obviously, from Mr. Machado and the rural business community, and through Charles Leclerc's work that he's going to share with you in just a moment. And we were able to, I believe, cut down a lot of the quote-unquote red tape that sometimes binds us as a regulatory municipal government, to the point that we're very comfortable with where we're at now. Will we agree on 100% of it all the time? No. But I think we really moved to a point where the city came pretty far toward the middle. Mr. Machado might not agree with that, but I'm hoping he will. I'm sure he has some other opportunities and some things to talk about that we could do. But we do have a city attorney, I believe, that's very comfortable with where we are at this point. And what we really wanted to do at this workshop is make sure that we presented the city's point of view and the rural business point of view at the same time, so that you could see that there is going to be a little bit of a difference there. But I think the majority of the key points were aligned. Maybe the follow-through, maybe some of the things that come after these businesses are into the system, so to speak. Maybe they'd like those to be a little bit softer. We're kind of comfortable where we're coming from, and we know that we can regulate them, and we have, unfortunately, the enforcement if it doesn't work out as we'd like. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Charles Leclerc, your interim community development director. He's going to go through where we got to, and then if it pleases the council, I think instead of having a few folks, there will be public commenters, I believe, but I would love to extend the floor to Mr. Machado and allow him to share the side that he's coming from, because I know that there are several options that he would like the city and the council to hear and consider.
Please proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As City Manager Johnson, wrong city, commented, we are at a workshop. We needed to create some kind of language for the city to consider. We have worked with representatives of the community in creating this language. You have to have some place to put it, so we are proposing that this be a chapter of the new development code. As noted on the screen, it would be considered Chapter 9.54, Land Use and Business Registration. As the city manager also mentioned, we've had a number of workshops in April and May, July, August, October, and December of last year dealing with this topic in dealing internally, dealing with representatives of the rural community, then broadening that so that it was not only rural oriented, but any business within the community that was subject to the criteria and requirements and the issues being discussed in this ordinance. The city is proposing an innovative approach to addressing land use activities or businesses that were in existence before the city incorporated, but which do not conform to current city regulations. Staff is asking the council to consider an ordinance that will allow such land use activities or businesses to continue, but move towards full compliance with city standards and requirements. And what I'm going to go through for you is the current language, again, subject to change when it goes to the Planning Commission and it comes back to the City Council, but go through section by section of the proposed language so that you have some very specific ideas of what would be required and what would be allowed. The objective of the ordinance, the proposed ordinance will create an orderly land use and business registration process for land use activities and or businesses that are currently not fully compliant with applicable city rules, regulations, and ordinances that existed prior to the city's incorporation. Ultimately, the ordinance will allow the following: businesses that existed prior to incorporation to receive land use and business registration. And the registration then allows them to obtain a city business license, affording them the opportunity to legally operate within the city as they progress towards full compliance with the applicable city rules, regulations, and ordinances. To qualify for this registration, a land use or business established prior to October 1st, 2008, city's date of incorporation, they must have received a valid certificate of registration from the Riverside County, or were found by Riverside County to be exempt from that registration process. the proposed land use or business is substantially the same, this is what those businesses must be. They must be substantially the same as previously registered or exempted. They must be located at the same address as registered or exempted. And they must have been continuously operated, not ceased operation for a period of more than 6 continuous months since the County of Riverside issued the registration or exemption. For a landowner or business owner to apply for a registration, the following must be provided: evidence to the Community Development Director that such business or land use has been consistently operated at the location in question with no change in material use or conduct since prior to the city's incorporation. Evidence can be one or more of the following: dated pictorial evidence, dated delivery or installation receipt for supplies or equipment for the business or land use, affidavits of abutting or surrounding property owners, or other evidence as accepted by the Community Development Director. So it gives some flexibility in what that evidence may be. The holder of a land use business registration must satisfy all of the following requirements. If a land use and business registration is requested within 1 year of the ordinance's adoption, the land use or business owner has up to 10 years to bring the business or land use into conformance with all applicable city standards, criteria, and requirements. If a land use and business registration is requested more than 1 year from the date the ordinance's adoption, the land use or business owner has at most 3 years to bring the land use or business into conformance with all applicable city standards, criteria, and requirements. Under either scenario, a land use and business registration shall expire on the 10th anniversary of the adopted ordinance. The requirements for the registration: if a land use or business is being conducted in a manner or within a structure that the building official determines is an immediate or imminent threat to the public safety, the owner shall immediately cease all activities that may be affected by the condition and promptly correct the identified substandard condition. Or, upon the expiration or termination of the land use registration, all land uses and businesses must fully comply with all applicable city standards, criteria, and requirements. No land use or business registration shall be issued to the owner of a land use or business with an outstanding city, county, or state health and safety or environmental citation, or which is found to be in violation of any such standards. Requirements for the registration: each land use, activity, or business shall comply with the following before a land use and business registration may be issued: reasonable ingress and egress, possibly including fire department required paving, but that's a case-by-case basis, consistently maintained for vehicular and pedestrian traffic. The activity may not violate parking restrictions or create a parking nuisance. 2, ordinary business, periodic fire, or other inspections such as stormwater pollution prevention inspections shall be allowed. The landowner or business owner operator shall enter into a hold harmless agreement with the city, identifying the city of Menifee from indemnifying the city of Menifee from any lawsuits that may arise from the issuance of the registration, a mechanism to protect the city's interests. Going on with requirements: by accepting the land use and business registration, the owner and or operator agrees not to enlarge, expand, intensify, modify, or enhance the land use or business without first receiving approval of a conditional use permit from the city. Failure to receive such approval shall require the immediate termination of the land use or business. On the upside to that aspect, however, only the expansion shall be subject to the conditional use permit. So the original business or activity can remain. The expansion would be subject to the conditional use permit review and stipulations such as requirements, conditions. All previously applied Riverside County conditions of approval must be satisfied within 1 year of written notification from the city, or an agreement to satisfy those conditions entered into extending that 1 year time frame. Excuse me, the button didn't work. The following restrictions and limitations shall apply to all land use and business registrations. Retail sales or commercial distribution within residential districts are prohibited at the site where the land use activity or business is being conducted. Metal shipping containers in residential zones are subject to the requirements of Chapter 9.16, metal shipping containers as accessory storage facilities on residentially designated properties. Outdoor storage, incidental or otherwise, shall be subject to the requirements of the underlying zoning district. Specific storage limitations and exemptions apply to businesses with a current and valid state-issued Bureau of Automotive Repair, BAR, registration. All vehicle dismantling, salvage, reclamation, or similar activity or related act upon vehicles, equipment, motors, structures, or transportable devices shall be prohibited. Except legally established nonconforming uses, all land use activities or businesses that do not conform to the requirements of the underlying zoning district and which are not registered are prohibited. That's current law. To conform to this chapter, a land use or business must register and obtain a city business license. The registration application is proposed at a one-time initial fee of $350. The Community Development Department shall be permitted to perform an annual on-site inspection to verify that no enlargements or alterations to the activity or the business have occurred in the preceding year. A fee of $150 is proposed for each annual inspection, and not allowing the inspection or finding evidence during that inspection that the land use or business has been increased or altered without city approval shall be grounds to void the issued registration. Another of the upsides to this is that ownership and or operation of a registered land use or business may be transferred or reestablished if a lapse of no more than 6 months has occurred between the sale or termination and the reestablishment of the land use or business. Legally established signage in place before the city's incorporation shall be allowed to remain. New signage shall be allowed subject to the provisions of the municipal code in effect for the underlying zoning district at the time the sign is requested. The alternative to not enacting this ordinance, or a version of this ordinance, or not registering your land use or business if the ordinance is adopted, is that the city may enforce its current land use regulation. Hopefully we've provided you with at least a kernel to start the discussion about this issue and provide guidance to staff on this issue. Council or the community, of course, has the opportunity to contact me in regards to questions they may have on this if their questions are not answered at tonight's workshop. What we are hoping for is an open discussion between the council, staff, and the community, and then following that, some guidance from the council as to where they would like to go from here. The possibilities are simply dropping the issue, giving guidance and having it come back to yet another workshop. We're giving guidance that enough information has been provided to staff that we can move forward with a code amendment that would be presented to the Planning Commission at a public hearing, and then from there, their recommendation would be forwarded to the council at a public hearing. With that, I'll try and answer questions you may have.
Any questions from the council at this point? Mr. August?
A quick question to you, Mr. LaCare. Has anybody out in the audience seen this? You've seen it before. Just tonight was the first time you received it? Okay. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to hearing from the public. There's not much time to digest this for all of you people. It's going to take me a little bit of time, too. And I don't know where we're going to be going at the end of the evening, but I certainly think that we'll be hearing from some of you people once you get a chance to look at this and digest it a little while. So that's all I have for you. So.
Well, for the benefit of the public, we're all seeing this for the first time. That's the purpose of a workshop. And if we have to drop this or refer it back to staff for additional development or have another workshop, or if it's ready to be referred to the Planning Commission, because it's an addition to the development code, if we decide to move forward on this tonight, that's the appropriate place for it to go next, yes?
Correct. If the council is satisfied that enough information has been presented to staff that a reasonable amendment to the code can be processed, its first step is a excuse me, advertised public hearing before the Planning Commission.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor? So, correct me if I'm wrong. So, if we decide to pass this on to the Planning Commission, that doesn't mean that the Planning Commission can't make recommendations to the council to change it, which means we can still hear from the public,
Oh,
correct?
absolutely, yeah,
Okay.
100% correct. There'll be several more opportunities for the public to weigh in. Did you have a question, Mr. Leesmeyer?
I don't right now, no, go ahead.
Do you have any questions? I have one question. I think it's in there, but I want to make sure that it's in there. If a business that was authorized to operate prior to incorporation, as the definition is, and that business after 1 October 2008 sublet some acreage, and another business established on that leased property and is currently operating without permits or license or registration or a CUP, would that business be eligible to fold into this program?
If that business or activity began after incorporation, it would not be an acceptable use under this proposal.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, with that, I think I would like to go with Mr. Johnson's recommendation to have Mr. Machado speak first, and then we'll take additional public commenters after that. And this is a workshop, so this is a question and answer format between council and the speaker.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, Rob,
Good
Mr.
evening.
Johnson. A little clearer. As Mr. Johnson said, we've worked long and hard on this for many, many, many months. And actually, I think we're far enough along that the basic fundamentals of what your rural business community would like to see and what you would like to see, I think we're very close to meeting that objective, really, overall. There are some language issues that we would like to have addressed, and there are a couple of fundamental things that need to be taken into consideration. Most of you, I believe, have been around here for some time, are familiar with the County of Riverside and how the County of Riverside has done business for the last 50 years or so, especially from the mid-'60s on up through the early part of the '90s. Back then, of course, the county was did a lot of things to encourage a lot of businesses to come here. They encouraged a lot of farming. They encouraged a lot of ranching. They encouraged a lot of things because the county needed the revenue for those things. And, you know, it was sparsely developed, and there wasn't a lot of concern. So a lot of the businesses that you have began in that period. They mom and pop startup businesses, and I think we have one that goes back to the mid-1950s, actually. When you all decided to incorporate, and I was given the flyer as a reminder, it said that one of the purposes of incorporating was to protect rural Menifee, rural America, and your rural businesses. The businesses that Iron Tree represents, which are about 25 of your local businesses, they were somewhat discouraged early on that they were not allowed to get a new business license because they were told they were in land use violations and they couldn't operate their businesses anymore, and they basically needed to pack up and move. So Mr. Johnson brought that issue to you, and you've graciously agreed to allow us to make a presentation to try and find a means and a way to facilitate that and try to accommodate the businesses that we have. The reputation that California has about its businesses is earned as one of the worst in the country, but I don't think that has to happen in Riverside County. And I don't think that has to be the case here. So I think, and I do believe that with the city of Menifee and your management staff has been diligent in trying to overcome some of those things so that we could reach a compromise, so to speak, and allow these businesses to continue. But I have to take issue with a couple of things, and I just want to bring them to your attention, because if we move forward, we would like you to help us get a better understanding or make these things work better. The 10-year requirement, which is a language, for us is somewhat of a language issue. It cannot, in our view, be tied to coming into compliance that's going to reoccur from time to time. And the reason is 10 years from now is 2025. The ordinances and the regulations of the city of Menifee in 2025 are not going to be the ordinances and regulations we have today. They're going to change. The language in here does not call date. It doesn't have a call date for what kind of compliance we want to have. Do we want these businesses to be compliant with an element of public safety? Do we want them to be compliant with landscaping? What is it exactly that we want them to come into compliance with? Zoning. You have a general plan. You've changed the general plan from what the County of Riverside has. These businesses, a lot of them, have no chance of ever coming into compliance under those terms. There would have to be something that allows them to live out their days, or a vehicle with which they can continue to operate for the life of that business. So it's not really an objection to wanting to come into compliance. It's more a definition of what's going to be acceptable for coming into compliance. You want to put up another fence, or do you want to grow some trees, or whatever the reason might be. So that's one. Also, when we say to somebody, we want you to come into compliance, and we give you a set of rules, and we have the same issue throughout the country with the EPA and state water quality and all that. We set a set of guidelines today. We make people spend a lot of money to come into compliance, and then tomorrow afternoon we tell them they're illegal. If we're going to survive, we have to stop doing that. We have to come up with something that's going to create enough longevity to where people have an opportunity to meet their legal obligations, to maintain public safety, and to maintain the public welfare. I believe every business can do that if the options are there so that they can. But creating an environment where it's impossible for them to comply only basically puts a noose around their neck that they're done within a given period of time. You have some very, very loyal people who work in this community. You have some very, very loyal people who love this city and love where they live. They want to work here, and they want to have their business here. They need to have your help to make that happen. Well, one of the other issues is we're asking within this that you not be in violation of anything if you want to have business registration. Mr. Leclerc is very adamant. Everybody should be a law-abiding citizen, of course. But every one of these businesses has a code case for a land use violation. That's why they don't have a business license. There's nothing in here that says that we're going to wipe that slate clean. It says that you need to pay all the fines and you need to come into compliance before we're going to allow you to take care of this. You're going to come into this ordinance, under the jurisdiction of this ordinance. How are we supposed to do that? We can't. There is absolutely no way that we can expect these people. They derive their business from the county of Riverside. They came in and with the best intentions, and they built some stuff and they opened a business, and they were told that that was okay. Now we have come along since 2008 and said, no, you can't have a business license anymore because you're violating our current municipal code. What we need to do, in my opinion, is we need to say, okay, we require you to come in and get this business registration. When you do that, we're going to take away that zoning violation or that land use ordinance because you're not really in violation, and you weren't in the first place anyway. What the county of Riverside allowed you to do and what the city wants to do are oftentimes two completely different things. So we need to have a vehicle with which they can feel comfortable to come into the city, ask for their registration, and not be penalized, and not be told that you've got to pay a $10,000 fine, or you have to do some other arbitrary thing so that you can take advantage of this ordinance. Within the contents of this, we're saying that not only can you not expand your business, but we have a right to come on your property and make sure you didn't. This is not a foreign country. This is the United States of America. People have a right to their privacy. People have a right to earn a living, and people have a right to expand their business. The Ordinance 348 is very clear on what you have to do if you want to expand your business. If you want to expand a business, you must come into compliance with the 2013 CBC to build a structure. You must come into compliance with county fire. You must come into compliance with county health. That is already within the contents of Ordinance 348. We don't need to relive it here. Having a requirement of a conditional use permit, maybe that business doesn't need a conditional use permit. Why would we ask them to get a conditional use permit if we don't have to? That's a $10,000 or $15,000 bill that maybe they don't need to do. If they need to do it, and if they are non-complying, which is what a conditional use permit is for, then of course. But if they're simply going to do something that is not really affecting that land use, and it does not violate Ordinance 348 as far as buildings and structures and access and ingress and egress, why would we be going on there requiring them to do that? Within the context of this, we are saying that you can't hire another employee, because that's expanding your business. You can't have another vehicle. Don't we want these businesses to grow so that they can eventually buy a new building, increase their business, become more profitable to the city, pay more taxes? How can you expect them to do that if you're not going to let them grow? Sure, if that growth has an impact on public safety, yes, then we have to mitigate that. If it's a public welfare issue, then we have to mitigate that. But we don't need to arbitrarily go onto somebody's land or go into their business and say, you made more money last year, so you can't run your business anymore. And that's effectively what you're saying within the context of this. So we'd like to see you change that. You have one of the conditions. And again, we're re-illustrating that we want business to come into compliance with applicable requirements of the Menifee Municipal Code. If it's something that's reasonable that a business owner can do, I believe that you're going to find all of your businesses are more than happy to try to get that done. They're not interested in operating illegally anyway. They're interested in making money and providing services and goods to your community. That's what they're there for, and that's what we want them there for. Licensing, we can't really ask a business, are you doing anything different than what you did yesterday? Anybody who's ever been in business knows that the diversity of business is the key factor to survival of a business. It doesn't mean that if we're making airplanes, we're suddenly going to now be producing automobiles. But what it does mean that if we're making airplanes, we might want to open a section that fixes props or does something of that nature. It's not really it's a material change in the business, but it's not a change in the overall scope and impact upon the land. And I think that's a key thing that we should remember, that we develop zoning ordinances and we develop ordinances for public welfare and public safety. That's our objective. It's not supposed to be for any other reason. So if we have a business that's impact is no greater than the impact of something that's already permitted, why do we want to set a standard upon them that's different than somebody else or that other person? What a business needs is not the latitude to change the entire scope of their business, but they do need somewhat latitude so that they can maintain enough diversity so, again, they can make profits and they can expand their business. You have businesses here, and you probably know of three of them. One of them started out in the back room of an old abandoned house and is now turned into got a metal building and is quite a substantial little business and probably could get a lot bigger. But if we'd had these regulations in place then, that business would have been lost. We would have lost it for the community, we'd have lost it for everybody. Nothing works better than the government and the people working together. We saw that in 2 world wars, that we were able to accomplish things nobody in the world could do because of those things. We can't lose track of that. It cannot be the government versus business. It has to be the government working with business if we intend to make this country survive. If we want to provide a good, secure home for our people to live in, we have to provide the businesses and the revenue and the tax base so we can ensure that. And we can't do that without today's businesses. There are no poor people who are creating jobs. There are only the entrepreneurs that you have, the people who are willing to take a chance. And let's face it, we don't have that many of those people anymore. Most people will not go out there and put $100 down on a pass line to see if they can turn it into 2. They won't do it. So the businesses we have today, we need to protect them so they, in turn, will be evidence for tomorrow and the young people of tomorrow that, yes, you can make it, and your government will stand behind you to get that done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Machado. Don't go away just yet. I just want to summarize your main points, because I want to make sure I understood them. But before I do that, could you please state for the record your relationship to the rural, you mentioned that you had your Iron Tree consulting firm.
I'm the president and CEO of Iron Tree Consulting and Mitigation. We do basically code enforcement issues on behalf of citizens and businesses. We do environmental BMP regulations and deal a lot with government agencies trying to help businesses and private citizens deal with the regulatory climate. We got involved in this. We were asked to come in and help with this particular issue, this and your container ordinance, and to help certain businesses. There were a couple of public meetings, and about 65 people or so came to those and asked us if we would help try and get this done.
And are you an attorney, an engineer, a certified planner? What's your professional expertise?
My profession, I'm an engineering contractor,
Okay.
and I have 8 years of law, but I don't have a law degree. When I found out what it was like being an attorney, I decided it was not probably a good idea for me to do that. But I've worked in this for about 35 years.
Okay.
And I've worked for the city of San Diego. I've worked for the city of the one next to Palm Springs, various Thousand Palms in various different cities on mostly structural and roads and that kind of
And
stuff.
is your business in the city of Menifee, or is it in the county? If it's in the county,
It's in
where
the
is
county.
that?
We're in Anza, California.
Okay. Thank you very much for enlightening us to that. What I heard you say was, I'm just going to go down the list, broad strokes of what you shared. You got an issue with the 10-year requirement for the reasons you articulated. You'd like us to define what does come into compliance actually mean. You said you'd like us to create a longevity after complying or registration. You'd like it to have a mechanism for not to be in violation in order to participate. What I took away from that was, how do we grandfather participation in a way? I think that's what you were sharing.
Well, the issue, Mr. Mayor, is that almost unilaterally, all of the businesses, this issue came to a head because they could not get a city business license. They were
Understand.
denied a license.
I got you.
And it was because they had a land use violation, for the most part. The law, and of course you have the city attorney, but in our view, they were not in violation. They either had a prescriptive waiver, or they were there at the consensus of Riverside County in one measure or another. Riverside County has never had a business license requirement.
No, they've had a business registration.
They've had
requirement.
business registration. They started that in 2002, I believe, somewhere around in there. And all of the businesses that we're referring to have one of those registrations. Some of them even have a City of Menifee business license.
Okay, and thank you for clarifying that one. And then this is your words, we would like the city to have the businesses come in to register and waive all violations except safety, health, and welfare type violations.
That's correct.
Okay, that's fair. I think in some cases, I think that's all we're dealing with, but we don't know until we sit down at the table.
They're almost all land use violations, that you're using your garage illegally, that you have a commercial business in your garage. You can't have that.
And going on, cannot expand business without CUP permit, conditional use permit. You're asking us to waive those in most cases.
Well, not waive it. If a conditional use permit is required for the expansion, then that's part of Ordinance 348. We can't very well go around that or make an exception to it.
So
But
wait,
in a lot of the
Can I clarify with a scenario? I want to make sure
Sure,
that
go
I
ahead.
understand
Sure.
your position completely, because I think I'm in disagreement with you slightly.
Okay.
Not too far off, but if I have a business in this category that I've had for 20 years, and I am seeking to expand it, and I change the business footprint by either adding a smaller building or adding a function, let's say we're dealing with oily waste or something that needs to participate in an MS4 permitting process, are you saying that you want us to waive those and
No.
allow them to expand unfettered?
No, if it's an issue of public safety.
Okay.
Oil, oil and that sort of thing, byproducts, acids and all those things, those are issues of public safety. They can't be waived.
Okay, thank you for
A
that.
small building,
Like
probably
for storage of product?
a storage of something, if it's less than 125 feet, it should be permitted.
Okay.
If it's large enough that it constitutes putting in a machine shop, then it's got to have a conditional use permit.
And going on to the last two, if I got these right, this is you talking, we want businesses to come into compliance with the Menifee Municipal Code to the extent possible.
Yes,
Okay.
but we're asking the government to make it where it would be possible.
Yeah, I think that's why we're here.
Oh, okay, well, but the language in here
Mhm.
doesn't really allow for that.
Okay,
In the language that we had prior, when we met with, with staff on this before, we had language that was typical that it had to meet an element of public safety.
and on the last point, licensing, the question you posed, you rhetorically asked us, are you doing something different today than you were allowed to do yesterday? And to allow that to continue, you use the propeller expansion as an example of that.
Right.
Is that what you meant?
Yes.
Okay.
As long as there's no material difference in the impact upon the land or the community, what are we regulating?
Okay.
Because the regulation should be that if we are going to change the impact, or we're going to do something different that ordinarily would be accepted, then yes, we need the permit to go along with that, because it's non-conforming, it's out of compliance with what we already have. But if you have a tractor on one side of the street and it's used for farming, and you got a tractor on the other side of the street that's used for building roads, they are an identical tractor. You can't prohibit one when the other one is permitted as a matter of right. I mean, it simply doesn't make sense.
Okay.
So that's all we're basically asking for, that if a business wants to expand not a building and not a use that's affected by public safety, but it's simply something that's added to enhance the business that has no material impact, they should be allowed to do that. And to take away the requirement that code enforcement can come on the property and inspect them to see if they're expanding or not. I mean, that's ridiculous, and it's not, I don't see how it's enforceable either. I mean, is it going to be arbitrary that code enforcement's going to come out, well, I think you expanded because you got a new trash can. I just don't think we should go there.
All right, thank you. Mr. August?
I want to thank you for covering all the questions like you did, Mr. Mayor. I have a question, Mr. Machado. How many, are we talking, did you mention we're only talking about 25 businesses?
I have been led to believe that you have over 200 of them.
Oh, over 200 businesses.
I can only
Okay.
I can only profess to represent the ones that I have their names, and they have given me input or told me what it is they would like to see happen.
And that's of the 25 businesses.
That's 25.
In your experience, do you think those other 175 businesses will come here and want a different ordinance, or?
If you put this ordinance out in front of them and you say, come on in, we're ready to do business, they'll be lined up outside the door.
Okay. All right. And one other question. The city is going to be having a business park down on Scott Road in Commerce Point. Of the 25 you represent, what would your opinion be about the people you represent? Would they rather be at a business park or stay on their land?
You're going to think this is crazy, but people who live in rural America, they live there for a reason. You're not going to get very many people, small businesses in rural America, that are going to want to move to a business park.
Okay.
It's just not going to happen. And being that I know a lot of these, and I come from a family, my family settled in California 275 years ago. And I can tell you that the idea that you can own a piece of land and you can sell cherries or berries or whatever you want from that is instilled in the people of California that live as part of rural America. And you're just not going to take that away from them.
I understand that. Now, in your experience, you've been doing this for 30 years. We're looking at 10 years to come into compliance. I mean, we're talking about it anyway tonight. Of the 25, let's say of the 200 business in the city of Menifee, in 10 years, development being what it is, people getting older, wanting to retire, how many of those businesses do you think will sell out to development or whatever?
Probably half,
Half? Okay.
maybe,
Okay.
and maybe none. You know, where I'm at in Anza, it's been that way for many, many, many years. And then closer you get to Temecula, you see the change occurring faster. I think you're in 5th or 6th generation housing here. In the southern part of the county, they're still realizing 1st generation housing. So things are much different, much slower paced. But in answer to your question, attrition naturally being what it is, I mean, we would expect that they would either grow and get bigger. But, you know, you've got 5 of them that I can think of that have children that want to take over that business. So, you know, you never know.
Unless unless it's more lucrative and people have to make that decision, you know, when everybody has their price, right?
Well, if everybody does that, God help us.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I just, as a matter of reference, wanted to make sure that you had in your hands the draft, which is actually an ordinance layout. We did make copies for those that are in attendance as well. So when we drafted the PowerPoint, it came right from this, but we want to make sure that you had that in your hands to see that. And also, I neglected to mention that there are some other businesses without plot plans, without updated plot plans, without that are actually brick and mortar businesses that are here tonight. I'm not going to call them out by name, but they are also covered in this that we've been working with up in the Romaland area as well. So I just want to make sure that they were included in this as well as the rural businesses that we're talking about.
Yeah, if I could make a comment about plot plans, you know, a plot plan is probably the easiest document to create. And a lot of people can do it on their own, and even if you have an engineer do it, it's not really terribly expensive to do. And for the sake of public safety, we could, and I believe the business community wouldn't have a problem with dealing with some sort of, if there's a question. But, you know, I mean, any one of you could go do a site inspection on these businesses, and you would see right from the get-go what we got going on. The one other thing I wanted to say was that the paving and the fire department issues in here, the fire department does not require paving. They require an impervious surface in some instances. The fire department no longer allows grades steeper than 15%, so the paving issues should be a moot point. But if they have to come in to comply with fire, and fire is one of the biggest problems we have in this state, you know, since we're all using CAL FIRE, which hopefully someday we'll stop doing that. But as long as we're doing it, and we've got the California Fire Marshal involved, the regulations that they have, if you applied them to 75% of the businesses we have today, we wouldn't have any businesses. The turnaround requirements, because they can't stop from running over sprinklers and things, are so excessive that most of your businesses could never even comply with the width and the space necessary to turn a fire engine around. Just simply couldn't do it. Parking, of course, is an issue of public safety. But the fire requirements should be the fire requirements that were in effect when the business was commenced, not the regulations that are in place today, because they can't do it. They just simply cannot meet that objective. So
That's a valid statement from my perspective. Any other questions from Mr. Machado at this point?
No, right now.
Mr. Leclerc, could you address some of the, I mean, is there anything that you would like to address now about Mr. Machado's points? I mean, are we almost there with some of the stuff? It seems to me that we're close.
Well, obviously, it's a matter of opinion.
Right.
He raised a variety of issues. One, I believe that the offer of 10 years to bring a business into compliance with the city standards is a pretty generous time period in order to allow an existing business to have the opportunity to determine whether or not it could comply with the requirements of the city and then move forward with that, or if they couldn't, have the opportunity to find an alternate location where they could continue their activities and come into compliance with our city or some other location. In regards to the land use violations, this ordinance does not say that they can't operate with a land use violation. What it references is health and safety and environmental. So it's an assumption at this point in creating this that the land use issues are not considered, that those code enforcement cases stop. Because if they are registered and have a business license and are conducting in the manner that, that has been established, that they're no longer in violation of the land use issue.
That's how I read the presentation as well. I mean, I interpreted it that way.
Mr.
If
LeClerc?
I can
No, hang on, sir.
Yeah,
Mr. August, we're having a discussion amongst us at this juncture, okay?
It might be helpful for me, not for you just to rush right through those, but regarding the 10 years that we talked about, I think what Mr. Machado was saying, that they could never come into compliance in 10 years because we would keep changing the rules and regulations. But to me, we should be able to get through that fairly easily.
Right.
Whether or not we pin them down to the regulations here, tie them to what's ever here now. How do you address his question on, we're going to have a different land use regulation or zoning in 9 years, and therefore, do they have to comply in 9 years even though we've changed the whole game for them?
They have the opportunity throughout that 10-year time period to submit their material to go through the process and have it established. This 10-year time period is not an expectation that the business will wait until 9 years and 3 months and then submit an application. They will have that 10 years in order to evaluate their situation and make a decision as to how they choose to move forward. If that is a concern that the Planning Commission and ultimately City Council has, you can establish a date at which, you know, the date of the ordinance, the land use standards in place at the date of the ordinance shall apply. Establish something of that effect in order to make that.
But you understand Mr. Machado's, he says, well, hey, at the last minute, 12th hour, 11th hour, whatever you want to say, sorry, now you have to comply with these. I think that's the point he was trying to make. That's how I took it.
Well, I understood that. However, again, this is not a situation where we are saying we're going to give you 10 years of free run and then at the 11th hour you must comply at that point in time. It gives you 10 years in order to evaluate your situation and make a business choice as to how you choose to proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, let's take some additional speakers, please. Thank
Yes,
you very
Your
much, Mr. Machado, for everything that you've done over the last year with meeting with these businesses and meeting with city staff and providing input. It's been very, very effective, and we're all very appreciative of your time and effort with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rick Croy?
No, you can't have another horse.
Asked and answered, Judge. Thank you. I'm speaking as a private citizen. I had the pleasure of going to a meeting 2 Saturdays ago at the Rancho California Horsemen's Association. It was a birthday party, 80th birthday party for Lynn Maddox. Little did I know at that time that it was also a meeting for the equestrian community down there. Part of the wine country plan is we're not alone in this controversy. The county, it was a presentation by Juan Perez, the Director of Planning, and Matt Straight. And the citizens down there have worked with the county to come up with a great plan. Basically, their problem was very similar to our citizens' problems, where people that have been in business running either a boarding stable or a place where they have community events, anything to do with a horse. It all started about 5 years ago when a lady some code enforcement person came up their driveway and said, "I'd like to see your permits." And she said, "No problem, come on in, have a cup of coffee. Here's everything from the county I got in 1977 when she bought the property." Code enforcement says, "We have a problem. You don't have permits for this commercial operation on your property. You're zoned RR." She goes, "I'm zoned RR. When I bought the property in 77, it was zoned Ag 1. So it became a zoning problem, and through whatever reason, county sometimes doesn't notify people of zoning changes properly. I've lived through that. It's basically what happened is she immediately became out of compliance, and it was only 15, 20 years later that the problem arose. So They have worked with the county. They've come up with a great plan that I think would be worth it a call to Mr. Perez. Basically, what they've done is they've taken a specific group of property owners, and it's very similar to this. It's an opt-in process for the property owners, which is a good thing. They have the decision to make if they want to continue. The other thing that Mr. Perez was talking about is that what it does is it gives these property owners by right and by not by permit to continue operations and transferable to a buyer if they like. So in effect, it tackles the situation, and I think from what Mr. Machado says, one of the biggest problems we have in this language is it could never come into compliance. So basically, the county is giving these property owners a one-time deal where they can make their properties in compliance at no charge to them, which is another thing with working with the county, that that's a $25,000 proposition right there, so that they can come into compliance and everybody's good, everybody goes away happy, they get to keep their businesses, and I think that that's a good thing to explore. Thank you.
Mr. Leachmeyer?
Yeah, Rick, I just had a quick question. We were talking about the wine country equestrian deal.
Yeah.
That only related to equestrian type uses, right?
Exactly. It is a singular thing, so it's a bit different than us, but the template is there.
Right.
And I think that that's a fascinating concept, and like I said, the citizens working with the government, as Mr. Machado said, they've worked out a win-win for everybody, and it's still got to go through planning commission and approval.
Sure.
But they're going to get it done.
Okay, thanks.
Next speaker, please.
Tom Furman?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We did become a city to make it better for our citizens and not destroy the American dream of becoming self-sufficient, owning your own property and your own hard work. To answer a previous question you had on the type of people that live in the rural community, there's three basic businesses out there. There's the single guy that stays small, that may be a wood carver, and when he quits his business, he's going to ride off into the sunset and his property will be diminished. You have another business that we'll say the family business, that they want to work there themselves, hand it down to their son, and do the small business thing. Working for yourself or with your dad, you might be able to generate $80,000 in income. To move to an industrial park, right off the bat, is costing you $40,000 of your profit just to pay the rent and utilities there. So these type of businesses want to stay small. Now, granted, you're going to have that entrepreneur that develops his business, expands, needs more money, makes more money, gets more employees. He's going to have to go into a business. We were talking about the percentage of that. That's probably 1 out of 50. The example would be Tony Falco. He started small, now he's ready to go in an industrial building. You got the other scenario, Steve Segoya. He has a little business he's running with him and his dad, and that's as far as they want to go. All right? These are the ones that have been in this city since incorporation, and these are the ones I feel that they're looking to you guys for help. They're not millionaires, they're just hardworking guys, and they're looking for something that they can live with for the rest of their lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Furman. Next speaker, please.
Tony Falco?
Ladies, gentlemen, thank you for the time. I came up here, got a text that said this was going on. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess I would say, is my problem has kind of been resolved, which the council and public information has all been known. I'm speaking on the behalf of the people that haven't gotten their businesses to the point to where I had to go. We won't go into why I got to that point, but point is that everybody has to get to a point somewhere. thank you for Tom's compliment of saying I'm 1 out of 50. I don't know if I'm that lucky or not. But the industrial park, I believe somebody up here mentioned, we desperately need more land development for industrial. If you go to the city of Marietta, Temecula, Moreno Valley, Paris, drive down the 215, you're in the city of Paris, how many concrete buildings do you see going up everywhere? Okay? The reason why is we don't have enough space. We don't have enough people to fill that space because we don't have employees. If we go to expand, we can't expand because we're caught between a rock and a hard spot. I truly believe that your 10-year venue is a great idea. I think it might need to be a little reframed. Not everybody can afford to do, $25,000 land improvement. Maybe have somebody take the stake up or take the lead on having a progressive, depending on what their income is, ask for their income tax. That's not being personal. You're asking for their income tax to see what they can afford. Give them a projection, just like any business should have a plan, but have it some way where you can work with them instead of shutting them down, because it's very difficult. I was backed up against a corner. I had to come out fighting. I didn't want to do what I was forced to do. I was done. When I finally got where I was at, we came to a mutual agreement. I would hate to think that any of these business people would have to do the same thing. Okay? It's very scary when your income and your family, that you've put all your hard works and efforts, like Tom just said, into that business, and now all of a sudden they're saying you've got to shut down and you have nowhere to go. And I can tell you that I know countless people in this town that moved here, that helped incorporate this city, that run a business, whether it would be out of their garage, whether it be out of an outhouse, whether it be out of a tin shed, or better yet, out of their pickup truck, okay, that provide a living for their family. And they know nothing else. That's all they know how to do. These people don't know how to do anything else. They can't go and work for the city, or they can't go and work for the school district. So their backs are up against the wall. So I only ask you, whatever decision you make, involve people that know what they're doing, not consultants, not attorneys, businessmen. Okay, and I don't say that in a wrongful way, but hire or have a panel of people that are businessmen, that know what it's like to pay workman's comp, that know what it's like to pay liability insurance, to know what it's like to pay auto insurance, and then have your rates go up because you've had a claim, okay, and you have no other money coming in that year. Or your wife just had a baby and you have medical insurance to pay, and Obamacare kicks in.
Tony.
All of them factors go in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Falco. Mr. Johnson, just out of curiosity, I mean, we keep hearing numbers, 25 businesses here, 175, 200, and I keep hearing rhetoric, and I'm going to call it rhetoric because I'm kind of tired of hearing about it. Can you tell us how many businesses the city of Menifee has shut down in the last 6 years?
I don't know of any that we've actually shut down.
Thank you very much. That's what I thought. Next speaker, please.
Art Castillo. All right, I'll note that. Vivian Moreno.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Vivian Moreno, and I'm actually an activist from the city of Riverside. And I found out about this issue when I met with some of the residents who let our group know that they're having this issue here. And if you know us in the city of Riverside, have heard of 30milesofcorruption.com, which is the blog spot that we own. We've actually been able to be very successful in the city of Riverside in helping solve a lot of these issues. Some of the things that I have heard here tonight is the gentleman who just spoke here. He said that he had to come out fighting. And one of the problems that I have is that this city was incorporated in 2008, and it has taken you 7 years to get here. You have these people, these businesses, their lives are basically on hold. They can't move forward. They don't know what to do because they have been trying to get the answers from you for a long time. Okay, so I decide to come to your meeting today, and one of my questions is one, I'm looking at your agenda here, and there's no backup information. We have been putting thousands of documents of information forward for these people, and your staff cannot get them this information, and then we get handed this. They're printing as we speak. So the professionalism in your staff is what these people have to rely upon to get through to your control of their life. So let me tell you what our group is going to do. We're going to start following this issue. We're going to read every document. We have the best contract attorney on file with our group, and we're going to be following this 100%. I will also be taking this up with the County Board of Supervisors because these people need answers and they need to solve this ASAP. So I would suggest that everybody in this room please look at 30milesofcorruption.com and see how many finance directors, planning directors, public works people, city attorneys, and city managers that the city of Riverside has just gone through in the last 6 months that we have been involved with them. Thank you very much.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you. I just wanted to share with Ms. Moreno, we've been working on this for 11 months. We've had representatives from the rural business community. Mr. Machado is 25 deep in that rural business community, and we were actually the ones that offered to meet with them. We met with them 12 times, actually, over the last year. So there's been no hiding of information. There's been great dialogue back and forth, as I think you heard Mr. Machado attest to from the podium itself, that we're very close. Through a lot of hard work and a lot of give and take and a lot of reception and information from the public. So I take a little bit of exception to what you said. However, you are accurate. This is still a draft, but Mr. Machado and our staff has had this draft going on for quite a while. Be happy to share it with anyone. Be happy to meet with you after, before. Give me a call. You can meet with staff. That's not an issue at all. As far as not producing anything, this is a workshop. It's just for information. It's not a public hearing. It's not anything the council is going to vote on. It is an issue that we know the rural community wants us to solve, and we're working to solve it. If council chooses to send this to the Planning Commission, there'll be several public hearings chock full of reams of paper for you to read. But right now, there isn't. What you have is what you have in front of you, and so I just want to make that statement so that we're all clear on where we're coming from and hopefully where we're going to go.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And I guess I would just add that the Board of Supervisors has no jurisdiction in the city of Menifee. Next speaker, please.
Those are all the people who have turned in speaker slips unless there's someone else, and I see no hands.
Oh, we got one.
Come on.
I lied. I see a hand. Please state your name at the podium and clearly so that I can have it for the record. Thank you.
My name is Shelley Daigle, Daigle.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your. I have a couple of things, a couple of concerns. Bear with me here for just a moment. One of the things that, since it's a workshop, I have the, in my possession right here, the application for home occupation status for business registration program. My husband and I have a business in Quail Valley. I've spoken before at one of the council meetings. And we came out here in 2000 and we built our home. In 2005, we built our home, have our business on our property. We have 1.25 acres. We're trying right now where it stands. We're kind of going back and forth with the city. Before we became a city, we were under, when Quail Valley was unincorporated. We had a business. We actually had a business. There was a business license with the county of Riverside. We would pay our fees and all that stuff. Anyway, so we submitted a business application to the city. However, when we did so, we had this application for home occupation. It's so restrictive. We just earlier in the year, we were given a renewal form, which we sent our fees in. However, we are not going to sign our rights away as a business owner, this is very scary to us. In the section 21.36 home occupation, it's very, very restrictive. I've even spoken to an attorney regarding this, and they said this is very, very restrictive and very unfair. You have here, except for large family daycare homes, which may require 2 assistants, and small family daycare homes, which may require 1 assistant to be present in addition to the licensee or provider, no person other than a resident of the dwelling shall be employed on the premises in the conduct of a home occupation. Our business that we have a, we're in the telecommunication. That's our type of business that we have. It says the home occupation shall not be conducted in any accessory structure, and there shall be no storage or equipment of supplies in any accessory structure or outside building. It's just, like this gal over here, I'm not sure I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. It does put people, we're sitting on a fence right now. My husband and I are sitting on a fence because we want to comply. We can't sign this with the city right now. It's too restrictive. It's like, we're so afraid
Shelley?
because it's like giving our, so that's where it is. I mean, we want to comply, we're doing what we need to do, but, that's it.
Thank you for sharing. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Ms. Daigle. This is exactly why we're holding this workshop.
Yeah.
We recognize the home occupation ordinance
Right.
is not a one-size-fits-all, and there's pretty much everyone in this room understands that.
I'm just
So
letting you know.
absolutely agree with you.
Appreciate
Be
it.
happy to chat with you. Give me a phone call, and we can figure out what we can do to get you to
Don't walk away.
go through.
Ms. Daigle, don't walk away tonight thinking that city staff is not going to work with you. Okay,
I'm just kind of like, this is where we're at right now.
I got you.
We don't want to leave the city to go take our business
Yeah,
elsewhere.
we don't want you to go either.
Because we love you, but,
All right, thank you. And is there anybody else out there that feels compelled to speak that hasn't spoken yet? Yes, ma'am, come on forward. Datatronics, you don't want to speak tonight? All right.
Good evening. My name is Ann McGrath. I am the owner with my husband, John, of J&A McGrath Auto and Muffler on Marietta Road. You've probably heard about us. A little history. My husband's family came to this Menifee community in 1910, and McGraths have consistently lived here since then. My husband and I moved here. He grew up here, but we met and married in San Francisco and moved back while our grandparents still lived here. We opened our business in 1976 under the, in compliance with Riverside County. We obtained at that point a 20-year conditional use permit. At the end of the 20 years, Queso-Naceres was around, and Riverside said we needed to do a 15-year conditional use permit, which we did. No problem, done. And we were told at that time that after the 15 years was up, we're not going to need these anymore, you're going to be good. We were zoned at commercial scenic highway at that. I'm not sure what the zoning is now, but that's what it was. And we were told, you don't need this anymore, you're good. So 35 years we've had conditional use permits. So that means that expired for us in 2011. In 2012, I was contacted and said, you're not in compliance, you need to do this. Personal issues at that time, but in 2013, I came in and had meetings with staff and was told, too bad, you have to get a conditional use permit. Well, frankly, I'm sure you can see by my gray hair, I'm on the verge of retirement. Might want to work a couple more years, maybe, maybe not, haven't really made that decision, but neither do I want to spend upwards of $50,000 to get a conditional use permit. One thing that I was concerned about speaking to staff at that time was what was the hot button issue? Stormwater. And they said, well, you most likely will have to change your parking to have those pavers that have the water flow through them. And that's an expensive proposition, and I don't have it, and I'm not going to do it. But anyway, my comment is, we've been in compliance for 35 years. Now I'm not in compliance anymore. Frankly, I would like to be grandfathered, but I'm happy that we're making some progress, but some of these things are not. Mr. Machado has some ideas. They're not viable for someone in my position. No. Thank you for your time.
I just want to share, I understand your business has been around for a very long time. We appreciate your mainstay in the community. I just want to share with you that during my time on the council, I can recall 3 votes by council, past councils, where we've waived CUP fees on application. And so I can hardly believe that there wouldn't be a mechanism for that to be negotiated at some point.
The young lady that I
So
spoke-
especially if, no, it's okay, especially, if you can show our staff those old CUPs that
I have 'em.
that you were permitted, I'm sure that we can work, I can't speak for the city as one person, but I'm saying, as we're developing this ordinance, I'm glad that you came to speak about that so that we can add and keep those things in mind as we decide what we're going to do subsequent to this workshop.
Well, thank you for that. I do have those.
Okay.
So I'll be happy to, if somebody tells me who I need to meet with, I'll be happy to come and bring that paperwork and whatever else you might.
Thank you.
I can
Mr.
provide.
August?
Yeah, Ms. McGrath, I was out to see you a year
You did?
ago or something. And I have to agree with the mayor that when I left your shop, I was going, oh, this is the types of businesses we're talking about in Menifee. This should be no problem. But I know that all the businesses we're talking about tonight are not like your business. And so, and that means it'll be a little more difficult for us to make a decision regarding something. But I went out and saw you, and I was very sympathetic and empathetic with your situation, and a couple of other ones too. So I agree with the mayor completely on that.
Thank you. And I really appreciated you coming to visit us, that you're the only one that we've seen and the only contact that I've had, except for the young lady out front a couple years ago.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Um,
And Tom.
We are about ready to wrap up the workshop. Just keep in mind that there's going to be, as this process goes forward, there's going to be plenty more opportunity for public testimony and feedback and exchange of ideas. So with that being said, Mr. Johnson, do we have any more business discussed from the workshop standpoint? Because I do have a question for the city attorney.
You need to go to
Come to
the
the-
podium. No, you need to go to the podium. We aren't able to get it on tape.
I think Mr. Johnson got your, yeah. I've heard the term prescriptive rights used in a lot of ways. What is the definition of a prescriptive right?
Mr. Mayor, prescriptive right, usually you hear it in the term, usually the word easement is in that sentence, like a prescriptive easement, and it is under certain principles of real property law. If you use a property in a certain way, say for example, you let your neighbor's kids traverse across your property for, say, 30 years, and then at some point in time you try to put up a fence, they would say, well, no, I have a prescriptive easement to continue using that property. I have effectively taken ownership by virtue of my use of the property. That idea of a prescriptive right is useful in the real property law context. In the land use and health and safety regulation context, it doesn't apply the same way. It's absolutely a policy consideration when you consider historic uses and whether they ought to be allowed to continue. It's a policy consideration, but the law doesn't work the same way in the land use and the public health and safety context as it does in the real property law context.
Thank you for clarifying. I knew that there was some minor difference in how it's applied as well. Mr. Denver.
In addition to the things that have been discussed today, I've spent some amount of time in my district going from business to business talking about this evening tonight. And although I didn't talk to any 100 people or even 25, but I've talked to a number, and the majority of them said, majority of those businesses said, they started their businesses when Riverside County was in charge, and they didn't even bother going to Riverside County. The Riverside County wasn't even attending to business, and they started it up and never got called on anything. Everyone here so far has been talking about getting permits from Riverside County. I'm not sure that there was one that I went to that said they got a permit from anybody. When I went just you'll understand, Mr. Falco, when I went and built, I have a big, beautiful garage in the back of my place when I used to race cars and I needed a place. And a number of people, Tom, came to me and said, hurry up and get that built before the city starts because they'll make you get a permit. And I did get a permit, but I promise. But I think that there's a whole bunch of folks that never got a permit, and the Riverside County wasn't paying attention to business. What's the reality of that?
A lot of reality to it.
There are a couple of categories of uses, and there are what are called legal non-conforming uses, which are uses that when originally established were legal and then over time became illegal. Or not, anyway, illegal is probably not the right word, not consistent with the zoning code or the land use codes as they changed over time. This ordinance is really set up to deal with legal non-conforming use type situations, because the jumping off point, you may recall from Mr. Leclerc's presentation, was the use needed to have been permitted or registered or exempted from registration under the county's code. A second category of uses is illegal uses. And illegal uses are uses that were never properly permitted, which is what you alluded to. And right or wrong, there may need to be an ordinance or a device to address specifically illegal uses. This isn't that ordinance. This ordinance doesn't attempt to speak to that specific issue. And from a purely legal standpoint, again, not touching the policy question of enforcement, but just talking about the law, they were illegal when they're established and they remain not legal. If I could, Mr. Mayor, if I could touch on another subject, the city manager asked me to also clarify the use of the phrase "by right," which was used a number of times in the presentation. By right, I take to mean that somebody at one point in time was allowed affirmatively to use a property in the way that they were using the property. So so at the time of establishment, it was by right. Didn't require a conditional use permit. Might have been an outright permitted use. And then over time, either by virtue of the city's incorporation or by virtue of code changes that happened when it was county property, the property became a legal non-conforming use, which is the concept I explained before. So.
Thank you for that. Mr. August.
Quick question, Mr. Denver, I think you hit on something that's kind of important, because I do too believe this part of the county was neglected back in 2008. I don't think there was a lot of supervision. I don't think it was the wild, wild west, and I don't think they came out here and did much in terms of registration, permitting, or anything else. So my question to the staff is, are we talking, this only covers people that had a permit or a registration agreement with the city of Riverside, and what are we going to do with the other businesses that fall into the categories that Mr. Denver was talking about?
Good question. Unfortunately, when you peel back the onion, sometimes you get more onion. And I think when we did the home-based occupation ordinance, we peeled that back and realized it didn't fit everything. So then we came up with this concept and tried to make it fit everything. I think the city attorney did a marvelous job explaining the difference between legal non-conforming and illegal not conforming. And there are a myriad of folks out there who have businesses that were never permitted, that would be considered quote-unquote illegal. And over time, they're still that way. It's hard to be non-conforming legal business if you started out without any permits on your buildings, your structures, no licensing, no sales tax, no reportable income, those types of things that unfortunately get the city in a little hot water when we come across it, mostly by accident. We don't go looking for this stuff. But then when it comes to us, we have to address it. There's a unfortunately for us, there is I just should say we have to address it when we find it. It's very difficult. We can't overlook it. We can't allow that. So we have to address it somehow. So that would probably be the next. Sorry, that would probably be the next issue we'd need to tackle.
Can Mr. Machado just say one thing on that, Mr. Mayor? I think you wanted to say something.
Mr. Who?
The illegal.
Did you have a clarification, Mr. Machado, that you wanted to make from earlier?
Prior to 2002, when the registration came into effect, the registration basically came into effect because of a state requirement of water quality. And the requirement was to address all businesses, find all businesses and register them, and so that an annual inspection could be done for stormwater compliance and that sort of thing. Prior to that, Riverside County always treated businesses as if they were, as we talked about before, in compliance with the existing uses around it. Even back to the 50s, 60s, and the 70s, auto repair places, various different kinds of agricultural uses, manufacturing uses, they were all done in garages, and there was no such thing as a business license in Riverside County. And consequently, there was no such thing as a permit to operate a business on your property. The county's perspective at it was to create the RR zoning requirement, which you can have anything from a beauty shop to an airport in the RR zone. And the idea was that they would address it through the zoning regulations, that some, and when you look at the early forms of the RR zone, it called out a massive variety of things that were permitted as a matter of right. You could simply do them as a matter of right, as long as the impact wasn't any greater than anything else. And then they came to uses that would be permitted with a plot plan, and uses would be permitted with a conditional use permit, and so on and so forth. But Mr. August is exactly correct, but in Mr. Leclerc's draft of the ordinance, and as we had pointed out, if it, in looking at it, it either had a county registration or it was exempt. We're saying they were exempt because there was nothing ever required. So I think we've answered that question in there. There may be a case by case, but of course, if the guy has got a mining operation, next to a school that's been there for 25 years, obviously he's operating illegally, because that zoning designation or the intent of the law was never to allow that. And I think in that case, the staff would have to look at it on a case-by-case basis and say, yeah, back then when you started that, it was okay to do that. And you didn't need a business license, or you didn't need registration for that business. And that's probably the easiest way to answer it. But I'm going to disagree with counsel on one thing. That prescriptive right has been upheld all the way to the Ninth Circuit and far beyond on land use issues. And I can bring you at least 24 cases to demonstrate how that's been applied. You can't arbitrarily allow someone to do something on their property and then take it away from them simply because you want to change the law.
That's not what prescriptive right definition is, according to counsel. Mr. Denver.
I agree. I'm not proposing that. What I'm proposing is that when the vote comes, I hope to send it back to Planning Commission, that we instruct them to look into the opportunity to adjust this so that it's not just businesses that received a license from the county, but were made in such a time that they were allowed by the county. Just that addition. At least look into that issue and make a decision. That's all.
Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to offer one, I guess it's an observation and a point of clarification that may get lost in the presentation. It is important to understand the jumping off point for this regulation, because the jumping off point is not whether the underlying land use was or was not permitted under County of Riverside zoning upon the city's incorporation. It is instead whether or not the underlying land use was registered pursuant to the business registration program that Mr. Machado just referenced. And I think that's an important distinction because it basically puts the city in a position where it just assumes for the sake of argument that the use was legal under the land use regulations, and it uses a business registration process. So you don't have to worry as much about the underlying zoning. Mr. Leclerc will correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I believe that's the way we've structured it, and it makes sense given the explanation about the rural residential zoning that Mr. Machado just put out there.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm also trying to rifle through here. I believe we do have a issue or a section in here that allows the community development director to, something about proof to the community development director as an other opportunity for that the use predated the city.
Yeah, it says evidence to
And
the community
so-
development director that such business or land use has been consistently operating at the location in question with no change in material use or conduct since prior to 1 October of 2008.
Correct. So even if they weren't registered, but yet they have proof that they operated as a business, I'm sure that that would be sufficient enough for us to review and move that forward. So I think we've
I'm
covered
happy-
every.
I'm happy with
I think
that.
we've covered every angle, but there may be some disagreements over language still.
Council, what would you like to do at this point? Is there any, I believe staff has asked us to either, our options are to either drop the matter, have another workshop, or remand this draft ordinance to the Planning Commission for further public hearings. Mr. August.
I'd like to say I'm going to move to remand it to the Planning Commission, but with a caveat, or to promise to the public that we will have more hearings on that. I'd be more than happy to speak to any of you out there whenever you want to. This is not the end of the conversation about that, but I think we have enough, and we proceeded far enough tonight to at least move this one step closer to fruition or whatever. So I'm going to move that we remand it to the Planning Commission, and I'll look for a second after your comments.
Mr. Leesmeyer?
Before I second, I just want to thank staff for bringing this to the table. This is obviously a huge step in the right direction. You said it, I've said it, that no one size shoes fits all. It's a very complex problem, so I'm greatly encouraged by the efforts here tonight and looking forward to what the Planning Commission can bring to it. So I will second that we continue this on to the Planning Commission for them to chew on some more.
Do we need a formal motion and second, or do we have a unanimous consent to send it to the Planning Commission?
Unanimous consent will do.
Okay. Mr. Denver?
I agree.
All right. I'm in agreement too, so that's direction in that regard. I just remember, I want to thank staff and a lot of players in the audience and those who have brought this to this point, because I remember right after the incorporation vote, it was really bizarre before many of you were here. The county code enforcement came through Menifee and started issuing business citations all over the place.
200, 300 of them.
Yeah,
Yep.
and the interim city manager at the time said, whoa, hold the phone, what are you doing here? That was Mr. Wentz at the time. So they put the stops to that, and from that point forward, we have been mulling this over. I think we're almost there, and I'm really grateful that we're almost there, because when you think about it, it's almost been 7 years. We're on our 7th year of incorporation. No, 6. And if this gets passed as presented down the road, it allows another window of 10 years. So in effect, we will have been given these businesses who had legal non-conforming use authorization, or in some way were registered, a full 16 years to work with the city ultimately and get to a point where we want them to stay and be fruitful businesses. So I, for one, am grateful for all the effort, and I can't wait to see what comes back to us out of the Planning Commission. And if there are no other comments or from the dais, Mr. Leesmeyer, the mayor always has the last word, since you're the new council member.
Just a quick question. Where does this rank in order of magnitude as far as getting this done? I know we're in the middle of our development code. We're in the middle of EDC right now. So where does this sit in the pile? I'm sure a lot of the people in the public want to know that too.
That's completely up to the council, but since the council has shown this much interest in it, it'll be much higher on the list than some of the other chapters. So there are a couple that we are working on now, especially the economic development corridor. But I would assume simply after that chapter is done, we present it to the commission and move forward.
Is that a priority enough?
Great, it's
Yeah,
great.
I agree.
Excellent.
And, all right. Anything else? We're adjourned. 7:40.